My name is Dominique Ben. I'm with KSLA News 12. I will be moderating this panel on mental health. We promoted three panelists for today, but unfortunately, Bridget Moranto with Oceans Healthcare is unavailable to join us due to an injury. However, we are excited to move forward and begin this conversation with our two panelists here today. We're going to begin with Keisha Simmons, counseling psychologist with the Family Connection Center and Caddo Parish School Board. Thank you, Keisha. And there's a mic right over next to you. And then we're going to have Jessica Lattin join us. She's a licensed professional counselor and perinatal mental health specialty. She's with JL Counseling, LLC. Thank you, Jessica, for joining us. This panel, we are going to be examining the importance of mental and emotional health, right? So we know that your mental health and things in life can be overwhelming, right? I get it. We are getting ready to start school again. The kids are going back. We have to do all of the school shopping, the medical updates. Finances are maybe running low. I know that I'm at a point in my life where I am being a caregiver for my parents and my mother-in-law, and that can sometimes be overwhelming. About 7 years ago, I went through postpartum, and Jessica is going to be able to talk a little bit about that. So I get it. And it's okay to not be okay, right? It is okay to not be okay. And I think in this day and age, we have had them on our show on KSLA News 12 where they have said it's okay to talk to a counselor. The worst thing that you can do is hold it in. So I'm going to begin with Keisha to talk about what mental health issues are on the rise that we're seeing, whether it's from bipolar, schizophrenia, and then, you know, the children have mental health issues as well.
Mental health issues that are on the rise, first off, anxiety and depression. They are on the rise because we have so many triggers for both around us on a daily basis. So it's our ability to address those issues in a healthy way that prevent the anxiety from getting worse or to prevent the anxiety from causing depression. But those are probably the main two mental health issues that are on the rise.
How do you get past that? How do you get to the person and say, it's okay?
Right. Well, first off, events like this, right? The more we can raise awareness. And then for those of you who are out in the crowd now, go back to your space and tell 10 people, right? And so as we raise awareness, then that creates a level of comfort for the folks to say, okay. And then if you have experienced therapy and find that it works, share it, right? It's just like sharing where you go to get your women exams or your men exam, where you get your nails done, right? It's just like sharing that. It's all help, right? So we've just got to make it part of the kitchen table conversation, the grocery store conversations. Girl, I'm not feeling well. You know a good therapist? You know, I'm feeling down. You know a good therapist? I can't quite shake it. You know a good therapist? We're everywhere, and that's the good news. We're around. It's one on every corner nowadays. So it's a lot of us. And so just find the person that works well for you. Mm-hmm.
All right, Jessica, this question is for you, talking about perinatal mental health.
So first off, the perinatal period is any time from conception through the postpartum period up to 1 to 2 years after birth. So as far as women goes, 1 in 5 women will or have experienced a maternal mood and anxiety disorder. In men, surprisingly, is 1 in 10. And you are more likely to, if you're a man, you're more likely to have that if your partner does. So it is affecting a lot of people out there. Louisiana itself has a very high rate of maternal mortality rate.
All right, so when I had both of my children, I believe I went through postpartum. I know I did with my second. Why was I crying out of the blue? Like, I still don't understand it today. Why do we have that? What makes it happen?
Yeah, so typically in the first 2 weeks, you will have what we've heard of baby blues. Oh, that's just the baby blues. It's fine. And that is normal because of the hormonal changes and things like that that occur during pregnancy and after. You may have some dips in your emotions. You may cry over random things. You may get upset or experience rage. So it doesn't necessarily mean that like there's something wrong with you. It's just the hormonal changes happening. But then after about 2 weeks, if that continues, then we know, okay, there may be some further things we need to look at. Sometimes if you have other risk factors, for instance, being African American, being a military family, being a mom of multiples, having fertility issues. There's a whole list of risk factors that can contribute to someone experiencing that after they have their baby.
Yeah, I had a baby in the NICU, so that was enough stress as well. You know, you don't know what's going to happen. You're having to travel back and forth home. You want to spend the night every night, but you got to take care of yourself as well. Let's talk about that, taking care of yourself, because, you know, we always take care of the children, our husbands. I'm talking about the women in here. You know I'm right? We are so busy doing for everybody else in the family, and the men too. But particularly, I know for women, we are taking care of all of the health appointments for the children, for our husbands, that sometimes we forget to do it for ourselves. How do we get past that and making sure that we have time for ourselves, Keisha?
First off, prioritize it. Like, you really have to make a commitment. It starts with a commitment, because a lot of times there's so many folks are pulling from us, right? From parents, from kids, and then we are natural caretakers, right? And so we don't mind them pulling. We just go. So that's why taking care of ourselves, prioritizing it is important, because for a lot of us, it feels good to be tugged at. It feels good to be needed, and especially when we know we can help, right? So prioritizing care, self-care, first off, it has to be a priority. And then making sure you have a routine. So you just can't say, I'm going to engage in self-care, and then when the time comes, you're sitting like, okay, so what am I going to do? And then you find yourself back with the kids, right? So you have to set a routine. And sometimes that can be so difficult, because we'll name things like, well, go to the salon, go get a massage. Well, those are universal things, but really self-care is personal. Like, because for me, self-care, I just like to be. I sit, no sound, nothing. I just want to sit and be. So really knowing what self-care means for you, because it is personal, and then committing, right? So prioritize, identify your personal self-care, and commit to it. Right? It's not a negotiable. It's not negotiable.
I feel guilty sometimes, right? Like, I want to take, even though I want to go to the spa, I may want to take Sydney, right? I feel guilty. Don't do that, right? Let me tell you though, you're right, because I went to Florida about 2 weeks ago just for like a quick 2 or 3. I got some rest. I didn't take the kids. I didn't take the husband. I just slept all day at my parents' house, and it felt good, but I did feel guilty a little bit. But don't feel guilty.
So you need rest, like you need water. So put it up there with food and water, rest. That's it.
All right, Jessica, let's talk about the men, right? So the women are taking care of the house, taking care of the kids, ushering the kids back and forth to extracurricular. But men, they are overwhelmed too a lot with finances. We relate them to the finances, the head of the household. And with the economy the way it is, and a lot of people losing jobs, or maybe they don't have the type of job that they had before, how can men, especially when they don't typically go to get help, because they feel it's weak, right? A lot of men feel like, I can do this.
Okay, so it's important to understand, as men specifically, because you have such a greater expectation or such a greater load, that invisible load, the things that we don't even see that you're taking care of behind the scenes, that is why it's even more important for you to have somebody to talk to. Right? So whether that is your pastor, whether that's a licensed professional counselor, whoever, you need to talk to someone, because there's just so many changes going on, and it's a heavy burden to have to provide and solely be responsible for a family. You might be taking on other children who maybe not actually even be your own. So that is a heavy burden as well. So it's never a form of weakness to ask for help, to say, hey, I don't have this. Hey, like, today I'm mentally not okay, or hey, I have anxiety. I'm actually scared about this. I'm scared about these things happening, and just find somebody to talk to about it.
So let's talk about children, and because they are going back to school, and some of the conditions, mental health conditions that they have, and how experts can help.
So ADHD is one. That's one of the main ones we deal with. And, there are levels to it. And ADHD really is a chemical imbalance, right, of the brain. So
Can you grow
will have
out of
to-
it? Because I hear that a lot.
Can you do
grow
what?
out of ADHD?
And I won't necessarily say grow out of it. It gets better. What happens is you learn to live with it, right? You pick up tools, you pick up ways to live with it. Because sometimes for adults, especially with women, when we reach that menopause or perimenopausal stage, it will exacerbate. It gets worse. And there are adults sometimes we tend to diagnose. It's like, well, why am I just now finding out about it? Well, you had a case of it. You learn to live with it. And so as women, we know we suffer in silence a lot, but we learn to live with it. But back to the children, sometimes they will need help, but sometimes the help really is transitioning. So you have to incorporate it. Don't just go to meds, right? Look at what's happening. Look at where they're falling short. Maybe it's time management. A lot of times with teenagers, we see time management being an issue, which in ADHD, you're going to see some procrastination. So that's something to look for, especially with your teenagers. When you find projects are not getting done, papers not coming home to get signed, teacher's like, well, I gave it out last Tuesday and the field trip is tomorrow. It's in the bottom of his backpack. It may be an attention deficit somewhere, not necessarily ADHD though, but he or she may need a little bit more in time management, because here's what happens. When they start to fall back, right, the deficit occurs. My grades, now I'm getting Fs, right? I am not performing as well as my peers, so now that's tapping into my self-esteem. Now we got depression, right? Yeah, go on.
Oh, okay, so you work with Caddo Parish School Board, right?
I do. I'm a
All right.
behavior specialist for Caddo
All right,
Parish.
so I got a 7-year-old. They like to run around, right?
They do,
And a lot
yeah.
of teachers want them to stay seated. They don't want them to run around. But I have to admit, my baby, he just likes to just play.
Right,
He's very
right.
smart. So how do you work with the school system, right? If
Right,
you're not going to
right.
put them on medicine, how do
Right.
you work with the school system? Because what happens is the running around turns into dojo downs.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
They
yeah.
turn
Conduct
into
march,
write-ups and things like that. And you don't want that, but then you're trying to meet them halfway.
Right. Great question. One of the things I recommend for parents to do, especially and not just when they go back to school, but overall, put a system in place. Children who are hyperactive, and just because they're hyperactive doesn't mean ADHD, right? Some kids just got in it, and especially boys, they just want to move, right? And they're kids, they're supposed to move. But obviously, we can't let our classroom of 25 move at will, right? We would have total chaos. So what you want to do at home, put them on a schedule. Try to mimic the school schedule as much as possible. Because typically with kids, they have free reign of their home. I can go over here and play for 20 minutes. I can go downstairs and get a ball, and then I'm going to take this ball and go over here. So there isn't a lot of structure. So it makes it very difficult to get them structured in the classroom. So helping us out a little bit in school, give them more structure at home, and teach them how to finish the toy, finish the game before you go to something else. And then that will help with transitioning at school.
I'm going to try that.
Can I touch on that? So most of my career prior to me going in private practice was working with children. I've been to many Caddo Parish schools over the years, counseling children in the schools and in the clinics. And one of the biggest things I've seen is a lot of parents being in denial about their children's behavior and about what's going on with them, and so they fail to get them tested. They fail to get them the accommodations that they need. We have something called an IEP. We have a BIP. So like there are certain things in place where your child could get accommodations so that they can get the test read to them, or they can get like their test taken in shorter increments, or they won't have a time test at all. So there are a lot of resources out there, but oftentimes, and I get it, I remember at one time my daughter had to do physical therapy when she was a baby, and I felt so bad, like maybe I did something wrong. And as parents, if we get an assessment, or if somebody has to come to our house to do something, that's like a reflection on us. We feel a lot of shame, like I did something wrong, but you didn't do anything wrong. The best thing you can do as a parent going forward is give your child an opportunity to learn how to cope, to learn how to live with whatever it is that they're struggling with. And you don't need to be embarrassed.
Really needed that. Thank you for being transparent. I'm going to be transparent too. So my 7-year-old, he had a speech disorder, and I was in denial. And it took me a long time to get him tested, right? Just because I'm like, okay, everybody around you says, oh, he's a late talker, right? Especially the grandparents. They want to say, oh, they don't want to believe, right, that there could be a speech delay. And so when he was about 1 or 2, it was during COVID, and he had just had a seizure in December of 2019 or November of 2019 because of a high fever. And so then COVID came, and then it was time to go back to school. And I'm like, because a high fever, COVID brings on a high fever. And at the time, he wasn't able to manage his fever, his temperature of his body. And so we kept him at home for 2 years before he went to pre-K. That caused, we believe, a very, very delayed in speech. And then I went and got the help that was needed. And I wish I would have done it sooner, because there's something called early steps. Yes. And I could have gotten it to where they came to the house. I missed out on that because after 3, they do it. So what happens is Dominique and my husband, we had to pay to put him in to private. And I will say now, thankfully, because I really didn't think he was going to talk, and that led to a lot of my anxiety, staying up at night, feeling like I was a failure, like, why is he not talking? I mean, it was a struggle, like for kindergarten, right? Because he was still trying to learn his sounds. So we're trying to do stuff at an increased speed. So a lot of the anxiety for me, because women tend to carry that burden of worrying more about, like, what did I do wrong? What can I do to fix this? And so finally, he's saying things. He's talking in sentences, and he's doing well. But yes, I too did not want to admit okay, there is an issue and we need to start testing, because the sooner you test, you can get onto things and you can kind of reverse some things, right? Absolutely. If we had not jumped on getting him tested and getting him into some intense speech therapy, I mean, he would probably not be able to, up and down. Just simple things that we think above, below, pick that up, go get that. Believe it or not, that's all a part of our speech and our language disorder. So that is important. Now, you were talking about the medications for children, Keisha. What about, you're saying don't jump to the medications, but if they need it, talk to your doctor?
Well, that goes back to the screenings, right? And so allow them to get the assessments. And we're back to working with educators. A lot of times your teachers and school counselors are on the front line in identifying what may be going on with your children. So work with the schools, because they can see it and they can see things that you can't. And as Dominique pointed out, there are a lot of resources out there. And so I hear parents often say, well, the teacher didn't tell me, or the counselor didn't tell me. And then I'd say, well, did you ask, right? Because they're loaded, they're loaded with resources. And so you have to ask so they can make sure they're providing you with the right resources. But assessments, screeners, they're out there and they can get them right at school, or there are resources to come to your home. So yes, medication may be necessary, but let the assessment say that, and not just, jump to medication, because the idea is to coach children on, if there is a clinical diagnosis, then the idea is to coach them on how to live with it so that it doesn't become debilitating or handicapping in any way as they become adults. And so hence growing out of it. Really what they learn to do is live with it, and it's not as noticeable or distracting.
Right, that's excellent. And let me just say this: when it's time for those parent and teacher evaluations and
Yes, yes.
conferences, go to those. Whether everything is good or not, go
Right,
to
right.
those. I remember when my son began kindergarten, you know, he hadn't been in schools for 2 or 3 years, and he was like, "Oh, I get to run around." I mean, he was running out of the classroom. I was getting a text while I'm on the desk. I'm texting my husband, "Can you go to the school, please?" He ran out of the classroom again. And then find the correct teacher for your child and their mental health, whether they're suffering from anything, right?
Right,
And
right.
so luckily, we found some good teachers. And his first grade teacher, he never ran out of the classroom again because he went to the door to try her. But she was a great teacher, and she said, "You can stand at the door, but you better not go out of the door." Right?
Right.
And you can go over to this calm corner if you need to. And that's how he began to develop and transition into being a big boy, because we babied him so much at home. And so I think finding the right teacher and that will work with your children and work with you too. And let me know when there's something going on and not when it's too late.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, Dominique, I totally agree. And I'll tell you, parents out there is absolutely nothing wrong with meeting with school administrators, especially if you have a unique case with your children. There is absolutely nothing wrong with meeting with school administrators, school counselors, and letting them know, hey, I've got a unique situation, right? So even if, because obviously principals can't accommodate every preference, right? But even if they can't move the child, at the very least, they can give the teacher a heads up and provide the teacher with more resources.
Yes.
That's how we strengthen our teachers. But we need you to tell us, right? And so then if this teacher need additional help, the principal and the administrators now know we have a child who needs a little bit more. And so that's how we essentially strengthen the system to help our children. We have to work together, and it doesn't have to be a fallout in order to do so. Just tell us, right? Okay.
Okay, I'm going to open this up. I'll bring you the mic if you have any questions for our professionals up here. Come on, don't be shy.
I know y'all got questions.
First, thank y'all for y'all thoughts, y'all insights, and being so honest. My question would be, you all talked about how you managed or dealt with some things and individualized it, but when you all are in a partnership or with your spouse and dealing with issues with a child, do y'all have ideas, best practices, guidance about how to kind of navigate that together as a couple when you're trying to figure out what's best for your child and they're having challenges?
And correct me if I'm wrong, you're trying to figure out like resources or tips for like spouses trying to navigate or mothers and fathers trying to navigate
Yes, because you
their
shared a little bit how
children.
you really individualized it.
Okay.
Your husband managed it differently than you did. So what practices, guidance do you all have for couples as you navigate? Yes.
Yeah. I think you have to validate each other's feelings about it and not be dismissive, of course. But ultimately, everybody's going to have their own perspective and opinion, right? Because when we marry or when we have a child with someone, we're bringing both of our individual backgrounds together. So we may have different ideas about, I don't want my child on medication, or I don't want my child in counseling. And so we have to compromise. And that is, whether you're with your partner or not, you have to learn. That's a part of co-parenting, is compromising. And if that is difficult, then I highly suggest family counseling, where everybody has counseling together and you have a professional person that is mediating and helping you guys to identify some areas in which you can compromise and some other areas in which you might have to just say, you know what, like, I'm going to put my feelings to the side to do what is best for my child. At the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's not about, any animosity you may have about the other person, or even maybe what you might not do as an adult, but what is the best idea for your child going forward so they can be a successful adult in the future. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. That was a very good question. Do we have another question? And then we can wrap it up for our next panel. Our next panel is going to be moderated by Jeff Horshak from KSLA, and it's going to be talking about cancer. Go ahead.
Good morning. We have a question. My team and I, we serve a population of children that do go to school here in Caddo Parish, but we see things sometimes that the parents don't see as case managers. And so we know that these kids need additional help. The parents are in denial, the teachers are not recognizing, but how do you address the parent to say, hey, you need to go the extra step with your children? Because they say, no, they don't need it because it's generational. My mom didn't get it. I don't see where I need it, and I know for sure my children don't need it. But as a case manager, they see this every day.
Right. Well, one of the things that I recommend in trying to convince parents that their children need additional help, first off, focus on the issue, right? Not so much of the child or even the remedy that you may be thinking about. You know, like this baby needs counseling. Well, that's not going to sit well with the parent. I need to know why, right? So focus on the issue. I did focus on the behavior, right? So Johnny is, and make sure if you can get data, right? So that way, numbers don't lie, right? So if you have data, if you have any type of feedback or documentation to support your concern, share the concerns with the parent. And then whatever your recommendation is, make sure you phrase it in the form of help and support.
Yes.
Right? And not, judgment, right? Or identifying the child as a problem. And so, and then this is the same thing we do when we look at issuing behavior support, right? If I call you and tell you your baby has a behavior problem, you have a problem with me. But if you identify the behavior and how it is affecting him or her, right? And then offer the parent a solution. If you do this, then his grades will come up, or we will eventually do away with so many suspensions. Mm-hmm. So you need some data to support whatever claim you have, and take that route. Hopefully that helps.
And if all that doesn't work, at the end of the day, you did what you could do. Mm-hmm. You did your best. I have learned I cannot save the world. And I can give people all types of recommendations and resources, but sometimes it takes people a while. And they might say, they'll come back to me 5 years later. You know what? I finally listened to what you told me to do. It might be a little later on, but just do what you can. As providers, we get so burnt out, and we sometimes care more about other people than they care about themselves. And so that's where boundaries come in. And we didn't get to talk about boundaries today, but boundaries is something that's very important.
That's a good one. Yeah. And I will say it's all about relationship for sure. Yeah. So build relationship with the parent. And that's how you get that double back that Jessica's talking about.
That is so true. What Keisha was saying is it's the way that it is presented. It was presented to me in a not so great way. And I thought, okay, I'm moving my child. Yeah. I moved him to a different school, and it was like, wow. And it was presented to me at the new school, like, let's work together with administration. He loves cars, right? So let's put on his desk, and if he's good at the end of the school day, I'm going to buy him a Hot Wheel car and have those cars there. And we eventually worked our way out of that. But instead of just saying, this baby needs help, right? And so that kind of helped us, whether I buy a set of 10 cars and it's given over a weekly thing, but it was like, what is he like? Let's see if this works. Let's do the chart system and reward system like that. And we have a wonderful relationship with the administration at the school. And I was just like, oh my gosh, you guys are a godsend, and I'm so glad that you accepted him to come here. And it's a public school, it's not a private school. All right, so I am going to wrap everything up. Thank you so much for joining us for this mental health panel. Give our panelists a round of applause. They did excellent. Make sure you take their names down. It's on here. If you ever need them, you can call them. And I do want to thank you both for joining us and always being available to KSLA News 12 as well.